The Four Noble Truths in Buddhism, the first teaching of the Enlightened One. First teaching at Deer Park, Sarnath. In the foothills of the Himalayas, amidst the verdant landscapes of ancient India, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama embarked on a quest not for land or riches, but for the ultimate truth of existence. Born into privilege, he lived a life shielded from the harsh realities of the world. Yet, glimpses of sickness, old age, and death shattered his sheltered reality, igniting a profound existential crisis within him. These encounters unveiled a fundamental truth that luxury and comfort could not conceal. Suffering is an inherent part of the human condition. Driven by an unwavering resolve to find a way out of this universal predicament, Siddhartha renounced his princely life, exchanging his royal robes for the simple attire of an ascetic. He delved into the depths of meditation and self-discipline, pushing the boundaries of human endurance. After years of relentless seeking, a pivotal moment arrived. Underneath the shade of a Bodhi tree, as the morning star illuminated the sky, Siddhartha achieved enlightenment, transforming into the Buddha, the awakened one. His awakening was not a retreat from the world, but a profound understanding of its very nature. The Buddha's realization was encapsulated in what he called the Four Noble Truths, a diagnosis and a cure for the ailment of human suffering. These truths weren't meant to be abstract philosophical concepts, but a practical guide to liberation, a path out of the cycle of dissatisfaction and pain. The Buddha's first discourse on these truths took place in Deer Park, near the ancient city of Sarnath. Here, he addressed 5 ascetics, individuals who had previously been his companions in his early spiritual explorations. He chose to teach them first, not because of their past association, but because they were ripe for understanding, their minds prepared by their own arduous practices. He knew they possessed the earnest desire for liberation that would allow them to grasp the profound implications of his teachings. The original terms he used were in Pali, a language closely related to Sanskrit, the sacred language of ancient India. He spoke of Dukkha, suffering, Samudaya, the origin of suffering, Nirodha, the cessation of suffering, and Magga, the path to the cessation of suffering. These 4 noble truths are Dukkha, Samudaya, Nirodha, Magga. These concepts, though rooted in a specific historical context, hold a timeless relevance. The 4 Noble Truths are not confined to the teachings of any single Buddhist school or sect. They are the bedrock upon which all Buddhist traditions are built, from the Theravada practices of Southeast Asia to the Zen monasteries of Japan and the Vajrayana traditions of Tibet. They are a unifying thread, a common ground that binds together the diverse expressions of Buddhist thought and practice. Their universality lies in their direct address to the human condition. They speak to experiences that transcend cultural and temporal boundaries. These 4 noble truths are not just ancient wisdom. They remain strikingly relevant today. They provide a framework for understanding our anxieties, our relationships, and our place in the world. They offer a path not just to alleviate suffering, but to find lasting peace and true liberation from suffering itself. The first noble truth, the truth of suffering, Dukkha. The first noble truth is the truth of suffering, known in Pali as Dukkha. The Buddha's profound insight into the nature of existence is encapsulated in this single word. It is crucial to understand that dukkha means far more than just physical pain or emotional distress. While it certainly encompasses those experiences, its scope is much wider and deeper. It refers to a fundamental unsatisfactoriness that pervades all aspects of existence, from the grand scale of birth and death to the subtle anxieties of everyday life. Understanding Dukkha. The word suffering in English often conjures images of extreme hardship. Dukkha, however, is more nuanced. It points to the inherent instability and impermanence of all things. Even moments of joy and pleasure are tinged with the knowledge that they will inevitably fade. This impermanence, known as anicca, is a cornerstone of Buddhist thought. Nothing lasts, everything changes, and clinging to fleeting experiences only leads to disappointment. It's like trying to grasp water. The tighter you hold, the faster it slips through your fingers. This applies not only to external circumstances, but also to our internal states. Our moods, emotions, and even our sense of self are in constant flux. Dukkha also speaks to the subtle forms of dissatisfaction that often go unnoticed. It is the vague sense of unease that can arise even when things seem to be going well. It's the feeling that something is missing, a yearning for something more, even when we can't quite put our finger on what that something might be. This subtle dissatisfaction is not a personal failing, but a universal aspect of the human condition. It is built into the very fabric of our being. The Buddha recognized that this was not a flaw in creation, but a fundamental truth to be acknowledged and understood. 3 categories of dukkha. To better grasp the all-encompassing nature of dukkha, the Buddha categorized it into 3 distinct types. 1. Physical suffering, dukkha dukkha. This is the most obvious and readily identifiable form of suffering. It includes the physical pain associated with sickness, injury, and the natural process of aging. The Buddha himself experienced this. From the aches of his aging body to the discomfort of illness, he was not immune to the physical realities of human existence. The gradual decline of the body, the loss of vitality, and the inevitable approach of death are all part of dukkha dukkha. This category serves as a stark reminder of our physical vulnerability and the limitations of our bodily existence. 2. Suffering of change, viparinama dukkha. This category highlights the suffering that arises from the impermanent nature of all things. It encompasses the pain of loss, the disappointment of unfulfilled expectations, and the anxiety of anticipating future changes. Even pleasurable experiences are tinged with viparinama dukkha because we know they will eventually end. The joy of a beautiful sunset fades as the colors disappear. The happiness of a reunion is followed by the sadness of parting, and the excitement of a new relationship is eventually replaced by the complexities of long-term commitment. All conditioned phenomena are subject to change, and our attachment to them inevitably leads to suffering. In the Sabbasava Sutta, the Buddha instructs his disciples to reflect on how clinging to impermanent things leads to suffering when they inevitably change. 3. Existential suffering, sankhara dukkha. This is the most subtle and profound form of suffering. It refers to the inherent unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence itself. It is the existential anxiety that arises from our limited perspective, our sense of separateness, and the burden of constantly having to construct and maintain a sense of self. Sankhara dukkha is the underlying feeling of unease that permeates even the most seemingly perfect moments. In the Alagadupama Sutta, the Buddha likens existence to a raft that, after crossing a river, is no longer needed. This illustrates that even existence itself is impermanent. It is the existential uncertainty of not knowing what comes after death, the fear of the unknown, and the deep-seated longing for something more than the fleeting experiences of this world. Buddha's words and teachings. The Buddha's teachings on dukkha are not meant to be pessimistic or disheartening. They are a realistic assessment of the human condition, a clear-eyed view of the nature of reality. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, his first discourse after enlightenment, the Buddha said, "Birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, illness is dukkha, death is dukkha. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Association with the unpleasant is dukkha. Separation from the pleasant is dukkha. Not to get what one wants is dukkha. In brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are dukkha." He presented this not as a dogma to be accepted blindly, but as an observation to be investigated and verified through one's own experience. In a dialogue with his monks at Kosambi, as recorded in the Kosambiya Sutta, the Buddha further emphasized the pervasive nature of suffering. He asked them whether the pain from an arrow wound would be worse if the arrow was poisoned. The monks confirmed it would. He then explained that the physical pain is like the first arrow, while the mental anguish, the worry, and the fear are like the second, poisoned arrow. This illustrates how we often compound our suffering through our mental reactions to it. Our aversion to pain and our craving for pleasure create a cycle of dissatisfaction. During his teachings at Savatthi, as recorded in the Anattalakkhana Sutta, the Buddha expounded on the concept of impermanence, anicca. He led his disciples through a series of questions, asking them whether form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness were permanent or impermanent. They, of course, answered, impermanent. He then asked if that which is impermanent is the cause for happiness or suffering, to which they answered, suffering. Through this insightful dialogue, he illustrated that because all aspects of our experience are in constant flux, they cannot be relied upon as a source of lasting happiness. These are just a few examples of the many instances where the Buddha addressed the truth of suffering. His teachings consistently point to the fact that dukkha is not a punishment or a sign of failure, but rather an inherent aspect of existence that needs to be understood in order to be transcended. Acknowledging this truth is the first step toward liberation. It is not about dwelling on negativity, but about developing a clear-eyed view of reality, a view that allows us to see things as they truly are, not as we wish them to be. This understanding is the necessary foundation upon which the rest of the Buddhist path is built. It is the recognition of dukkha that motivates us to seek a way out, to embark on the journey towards lasting peace and true freedom. The second noble truth, the origin of suffering, Samudaya. The second noble truth delves into the origin of suffering, known in Pali as Samudaya. Having established the existence of dukkha, the Buddha then turned his attention to its root cause. He didn't merely identify suffering, but sought to understand its underlying mechanisms. This understanding is crucial because by knowing the cause, we can begin to address it effectively. This truth reveals that suffering is not a random occurrence or a punishment from a higher power, but rather a natural consequence of specific conditions. Deep analysis of craving, tanha. The Buddha identified craving, or tanha in Pali, as the primary cause of suffering. Tanha is often translated as thirst, and it signifies a deep-seated desire or attachment that goes far beyond simple wanting. It is a powerful force that binds us to the cycle of suffering, driving us to constantly seek satisfaction outside of ourselves. This craving is not limited to material possessions. It encompasses a wide range of desires, including the desire for sensual pleasures, the desire for existence, and even the desire for non-existence. 1. Sensual craving. Kama tanha. This type of craving is the most readily apparent. It refers to the desire for pleasure derived from the five senses: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. It includes the craving for delicious food, beautiful sights, pleasant sounds, delightful fragrances, and comfortable tactile sensations. It also extends to the desire for material possessions, wealth, and status, all of which are ultimately pursued for the pleasure they are believed to bring. In the Sabbasava Sutta, the Buddha advises to wisely reflect on the impermanent and unsatisfactory nature of sense objects to avoid developing this kind of craving. The constant pursuit of sensual pleasure keeps us trapped in a cycle of temporary gratification, followed by inevitable disappointment. It's like chasing a mirage in the desert. The closer we think we are, the further it recedes. 2. Craving for existence. Bhava tanha. This is a more subtle form of craving, the deep-seated desire for continued existence, for permanence, and for a lasting sense of self. It manifests as the longing for immortality, the fear of death, and the attachment to our identity, roles, and status. This craving is rooted in the fundamental misconception that we are a separate, unchanging entity. It is the driving force behind our attempts to build a lasting legacy, to achieve fame and recognition, or to accumulate possessions that we believe will somehow solidify our existence. Even after material needs are met, this craving can persist, fueling a desire for power, control, or a lasting impact on the world. The Buddha, in many of his teachings, emphasized the importance of understanding the concept of anatta, non-self, to overcome this craving for a permanent self. 3. Craving for non-existence. Vibhava tanha. This might seem counterintuitive, but it is a powerful form of craving nonetheless. It is the desire to escape from unpleasant experiences, to annihilate suffering, or to simply cease to exist. This craving can manifest as nihilistic views, self-destructive tendencies, or a desire to numb oneself to the pain of existence through various forms of escapism. It can arise from a sense of despair, hopelessness, or a feeling of being overwhelmed by the challenges of life. Ironically, this craving for non-existence is still a form of attachment, a clinging to the idea of oblivion as a solution to suffering. In the Alagaddopama Sutta, the Buddha warns against clinging to any extreme view, including nihilism, as it leads away from the true path to liberation. The chain of causation. The Buddha's profound understanding of the origin of suffering is further elaborated in the concept of dependent origination, known as paticca samuppada. This intricate doctrine outlines the interconnectedness of all phenomena and reveals how suffering arises through a chain of 12 causally related links. Each link is both the result of the preceding one and the cause of the following one, creating a continuous cycle of suffering. 1. 12 links of dependent origination. This is a complex concept, and a full exposition would require a separate text. However, the basic idea is that ignorance, avidya, leads to volitional formations, which lead to consciousness, then to name and form, the 6 sense bases: contact, feeling, craving, tanha, clinging, becoming, birth, and finally, aging and death, which inevitably lead back to ignorance. perpetuating the cycle. The Buddha presented this chain not as a linear sequence, but as a dynamic and interconnected web of causes and conditions. 2. Breaking the chain. The good news is that this chain is not unbreakable. By understanding how these links are interconnected, we can begin to unravel them. The key to breaking the cycle lies in addressing the root cause: craving. By cultivating non-attachment and letting go of our desires, we can weaken the links of the chain and gradually free ourselves from the cycle of suffering. Each link presents an opportunity for intervention. 3. Role of ignorance. Avijja. Ignorance, or avijja, is the fundamental condition that gives rise to the entire chain. It is not simply a lack of knowledge, but a deep-seated misperception of reality. It is the delusion that we are separate, permanent selves. And this delusion fuels our craving and attachment. In the Avijja Sutta, the Buddha emphasizes that ignorance is the root of all unwholesome states, and it is through the cultivation of wisdom that we can overcome it. By cultivating wisdom and insight into the true nature of reality, impermanent, interconnected, and without a permanent self, we can begin to dismantle the foundations of suffering. Buddha's teachings on attachment. Throughout his teachings, the Buddha consistently emphasized the dangers of attachment. He used numerous analogies and stories to illustrate how clinging to impermanent things leads to suffering. 1. Conversations with disciples. In numerous dialogues with his disciples, the Buddha emphasized the importance of non-attachment. He encouraged them to observe their own minds and to see how craving and clinging arise in response to pleasant and unpleasant experiences. He taught them to cultivate equanimity, a state of mental balance that allows one to remain undisturbed by the ups and downs of life. 2. Practical examples from monastery life. The monastic life itself was designed to minimize opportunities for attachment. Monks and nuns lived a simple life, free from the distractions of material possessions and worldly concerns. This allowed them to focus on their practice and to cultivate detachment from the things that typically bind people to the cycle of suffering. By observing the rules of the Vinaya, the monastic code of conduct, they practiced letting go of personal preferences and desires, cultivating contentment with what is present. 3. Application to modern context. While we may not all be able to live a monastic life, the principles of non-attachment can be applied to our everyday lives. We can practice mindfulness, paying attention to our thoughts and feelings without judgment. We can cultivate generosity, giving freely without expecting anything in return. And we can learn to let go of our attachment to outcomes, accepting whatever arises with equanimity. We can learn to appreciate the simple things in life, to find joy in the present moment, and to cultivate inner peace that is not dependent on external circumstances. This second noble truth, the understanding of Samudaya, provides a clear roadmap out of suffering. By recognizing the role of craving and cultivating non-attachment, we can begin to loosen the grip of suffering and move towards a life of greater peace and freedom. It empowers us to take responsibility for our own well-being and to actively participate in shaping our own destiny. This is not a passive acceptance of suffering, but an active engagement in the process of liberation. The third noble truth, the cessation of suffering, Nirodha. The third noble truth offers a profound and liberating message. The cessation of suffering, known as Nirodha in Pali. It proclaims that the complete ending of dukkha is possible. This is not a utopian ideal, but a tangible reality that can be achieved through diligent practice. Nirodha is the realization that suffering is not an inherent and inescapable part of existence, but rather a condition that can be overcome by eradicating its root cause, craving. It is the promise that true and lasting peace is attainable. Understanding liberation. This truth points to the possibility of liberation, a state of being completely free from the cycle of suffering. It's essential to grasp that this liberation is not a passive escape from the world, but a profound transformation of our relationship to it. 1. Nature of Nirvana. Nirvana, often used interchangeably with Nirodha, is not a place or a heaven, but a state of being. It's characterized by the complete absence of craving, aversion, and delusion. It's a state of profound peace, wisdom, and freedom. It is the ultimate goal of Buddhist practice, the extinguishing of the fires of tanha that fuel the cycle of suffering. In the Nibbana Sutta, the Buddha describes nirvana as the unconditioned, the unmade, and the deathless. This highlights its nature as something beyond the realm of conditioned existence, something that is not subject to the laws of impermanence and suffering. Nirvana is not simply the absence of pain, but the presence of a deep and abiding peace that is not dependent on external circumstances. 2. Stages of enlightenment. The path to nirvana is often described as a gradual process, marked by distinct stages of awakening. These stages are not rigid categories, but rather signposts along the way, indicating the progressive weakening and eventual eradication of the mental defilements that bind us to suffering. Stream entry, sotapanna. This is the first stage of awakening, where one gains a direct and irreversible insight into the nature of reality. The stream enterer has broken the first 3 fetters: belief in a permanent self, doubt in the Buddha's teachings, and attachment to rites and rituals. They have a clear understanding of the Four Noble Truths and are firmly established on the path to liberation. Once returner, Sakadagami. At this stage, the individual has further weakened the fetters of sensual desire and ill will. They will be reborn into the human realm only once more before attaining full enlightenment. Non-returner, Anagami. The non-returner has completely eradicated the fetters of sensual desire and ill will. They will not be reborn into the human realm again and will attain full enlightenment in a higher realm of existence. Full enlightenment, Arahant. This is the final stage, the complete eradication of all 10 fetters, including ignorance, craving, and attachment. The Arahant has achieved full liberation from the cycle of suffering and has attained nirvana. They are a living embodiment of wisdom and compassion, free from all mental defilements. Evidence of liberation. The Buddha's teachings are not based on blind faith, but on verifiable experience. Throughout history, there have been countless individuals who have walked the path and attained liberation, providing evidence of the truth of Nirodha. 1. Stories of enlightened disciples. The Pali Canon, the collection of Buddhist scriptures, is replete with stories of individuals who attained enlightenment through the Buddha's guidance. Sariputta's realization. Sariputta, one of the Buddha's chief disciples, was renowned for his wisdom. His enlightenment, as described in the Samyutta Nikaya, came through a profound understanding of the impermanent nature of all phenomena. His story demonstrates that liberation is attainable through insight and wisdom. Mahakassapa's awakening. Mahakassapa, another prominent disciple, was known for his strict ascetic practices. His awakening, also found in the Samyutta Nikaya, occurred during a simple meditation on the breath, highlighting the power of mindfulness in achieving liberation. Modern examples. Even today, there are individuals who, through dedicated practice, have achieved profound levels of insight and liberation. Their lives serve as a testament to the enduring power of the Buddha's teachings and the possibility of attaining freedom from suffering in this very life. 2. Signs of progress. While full enlightenment may seem like a distant goal, there are tangible signs of progress that can be observed along the way. These signs are not about achieving extraordinary powers or having mystical experiences, but about a gradual transformation of one's character and a deepening sense of inner peace. Reduced reactivity. As we progress on the path, we become less reactive to external events. We are less likely to be carried away by our emotions and more able to respond to situations with wisdom and equanimity. Increased awareness. Our awareness of our thoughts, feelings, and sensations becomes sharper and more refined. We are better able to observe the workings of our own minds and to see how craving and aversion arise and pass away. Greater equanimity. We develop a greater sense of balance and stability, even in the face of challenges. We are less attached to outcomes and more accepting of the present moment, whatever it may bring. These are just a few examples of the many signs of progress that can be experienced on the path to liberation. They are a reminder that the journey itself is transformative and that every step we take brings us closer to the ultimate goal of freedom from suffering. The third noble truth is a beacon of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and a powerful reminder that true and lasting peace is within our reach. It provides the motivation and inspiration to continue on the path, knowing that the destination is worth the effort. The fourth noble truth, the path, Magga. The fourth noble truth reveals the path to the cessation of suffering, known as Magga in Pali. This is not a passive path of acceptance, but an active process of cultivation and transformation. It provides a practical roadmap, a set of guidelines that, when followed diligently, lead to the eradication of craving and the realization of liberation. The Buddha, having diagnosed the illness, Dukkha, identified its cause, Samudaya, and confirmed the possibility of a cure, Nirodha, now prescribes the treatment, the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path is a comprehensive guide to ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. It is called noble because it leads to liberation and is practiced by those who aspire to that goal. The 8 factors are not sequential steps, but interconnected aspects of practice that support and reinforce each other. They are to be cultivated simultaneously, like the strands of a rope, each contributing to the overall strength of the path. 1. Wisdom Group, Panna. This group focuses on developing insight into the true nature of reality. Right view, Samaditthi. This is the foundation of the entire path, the understanding of the 4 noble truths themselves. It involves seeing things as they truly are, impermanent, interconnected, and without a permanent self. It also includes understanding the law of karma, the principle that our actions have consequences. Right view provides the correct perspective, the necessary framework for navigating the path to liberation. It helps us to see through the delusions that keep us trapped in the cycle of suffering. In the Samaditthi Sutta, the Buddha extensively explains the different aspects of right view, including understanding of dukkha, samudaya, Nirodha, and Magga themselves. Right intention, Samasankappa. This refers to the intentions that are aligned with wisdom and compassion. It involves cultivating thoughts of renunciation, letting go of attachments and desires that lead to suffering. It also encompasses cultivating thoughts of goodwill, extending loving kindness to all beings, and thoughts of harmlessness, refraining from any actions that could cause harm to oneself or others. Right intention is the application of right view to our mental activity. It guides our thoughts and actions in a direction that is conducive to liberation. 2. Ethical Conduct Group, Sila. This group focuses on cultivating ethical behavior and living a life that is in harmony with the principles of non-harming and compassion. Right speech, Samavaka. This involves speaking truthfully, kindly, and in a way that promotes harmony and understanding. It means refraining from lying, gossiping, harsh speech, and idle chatter. Right speech is about using our words consciously and skillfully, recognizing their power to either heal or harm. It also includes mindful listening, paying attention to what others are saying with empathy and understanding. In the Kunda Kamaraputta Sutta, the Buddha details the consequences of unskillful speech and the benefits of right speech. Right action, Samakamanta. This encompasses ethical conduct in all our actions. It involves refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and other harmful behaviors. Right action is about living a life that is based on respect for all beings and acting in a way that is beneficial to oneself and others. It involves aligning our actions with our values and principles, cultivating a sense of integrity and responsibility. The Salayaka Sutta contains the Buddha's detailed explanation of right action. Right livelihood, Sama Ajiva. This refers to earning a living in a way that is ethical and does not cause harm to others. It involves avoiding professions that involve killing, exploitation, or deception. Right livelihood is about aligning our work with our values, ensuring that our livelihood is a source of benefit rather than harm. It encourages us to consider the impact of our work on the world and to choose a profession that is both meaningful and ethical. In the Vinaya Sutta, the Buddha explains which types of livelihood are not suitable for a lay follower. 3. Mental Discipline Group, Samadhi. This group focuses on cultivating a calm, focused, and insightful mind. Right effort, Samavayama. This involves cultivating wholesome mental states and preventing or abandoning unwholesome ones. It's about making a conscious effort to direct our energy towards positive and beneficial actions, thoughts, and emotions. It requires diligence and perseverance, a sustained effort to cultivate the qualities that lead to liberation. The Padana Sutta describes the effort needed to abandon unwholesome qualities and cultivate wholesome ones. Right effort is not about striving or forcing, but about cultivating a gentle yet persistent effort to move in the right direction. Right mindfulness, Samasati. This is the practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It involves being aware of our body, feelings, mind, and mental objects as they arise and pass away. The Satipatthana Sutta provides a comprehensive guide to the practice of mindfulness, outlining the 4 foundations of mindfulness: body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. Right mindfulness is the foundation for developing insight into the true nature of reality, allowing us to see things as they truly are, without the distortions of craving and aversion. Right concentration, Samadhi. This refers to the development of a focused and unified mind through meditation practice. It involves cultivating one-pointedness of mind, a state of deep absorption where the mind is calm, stable, and free from distractions. This is often developed through the practice of jhanas, stages of meditative absorption, which are described in detail in various suttas, such as the Maha Parinibbana Sutta. Right concentration provides the mental stability and clarity necessary to develop profound insight into the nature of reality. These 8 factors are not isolated practices, but interconnected aspects of a holistic path. They work together synergistically, each supporting and strengthening the others. Wisdom leads to ethical conduct. Ethical conduct provides the foundation for mental discipline, and mental discipline allows wisdom to deepen and flourish. The Noble Eightfold Path is a dynamic and transformative process, a journey of self-discovery and liberation that unfolds gradually as we cultivate these 8 factors in our daily lives. It's a path that requires effort, dedication, and perseverance, but the rewards are immeasurable. Freedom from suffering, lasting peace, and the realization of our true potential.